All right, I am Meredith Elliott Powell, and welcome again to the State of American Business, where we're going to dive into the opportunities, the challenges, the solutions you need to really emerge successful during COVID. I am here with three of the brightest minds when it comes to business, sales, and leadership growth: Mark Hunter, Mary Kelly, and Sam Richter. And today we are discussing round two of our coveted white paper. And we're going to talk about processes and systems. What's working in today's environment? What isn't working? And what do you need to really emerge successful in this COVID world? So, Mark, I'm going to turn it over to you. And why don't you kick us off on this conversation?
Well, thank you, because there's so much here that we can dig into with regards to process. You know, as I've been going through and reviewing it and sharing the document with a number of people, one theme that I continue to hear people talk about, and that is how they thought, well, with all this COVID stuff, it would be, how do we bring in more technology? How do we automate more? How do we bring in more technology? And it's interesting, but every time the conversations come back to, hold it, what's the process? Don't think that technology in and of itself is going to save you, because it's not. Because technology, new equipment, automation, whatever, if it's not geared for the process, it's not going to work. In other words, define your process first. This is so clear right now, because I think there's a lot of shiny objects out there that people are running towards, and they're buying, and they're bringing into their organization thinking it's going to work. And I think in particular, software as a service, SaaS. A lot of people are bringing in automation systems and so forth from a software standpoint to allow people to do more things. Are you just complicating the process? Figure out your process first. And as we go through today, I know we're going to be digging down deeper on that. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Mary Kelly, who, you know what, incredibly smart. I'll let you go ahead and say, well, no, as you talk, people will learn how smart you are.
I don't know about that, Mark, but thank you so much. This is such a great time for business leaders to hit the reset button on their processes. Everything is on the table. When you go to buy a car right now, you can get green, yellow, red, maybe some leather seats versus some cloth seats, maybe the sunroof, maybe a different radio. You only have a few options. But think about if you were designing cars for 35 to 50 years down the road, every single detail would be on the table, including whether or not the car actually drives on a road. Do you need tires if you're not actually touching the ground? Everything is on the table. So many people are still mired in this idea that we're in 2020 and scarcity and COVID and restrictions. And in my world, I want my business people to be seeing the opportunity, that this is a wonderful time to look at every single part of what makes your business successful, what made it successful in the past, and where you can take it in the future. This is a time of forced acceleration. Hit the reset button, look at everything, and make sure that we understand that our competitive advantage has shifted from being really stakeholder focused to being customer focused. And if we start to think about every single part of our delivery of our product and our services in terms of that customer focus, what would change? Sam Richter, what do you think would change if we became wildly, passionately, crazy focused on delivering amazing value to customers?
Well, I think a lot would change. I mean, I'm sure everybody listening today has experienced what I think is a horrible process, and we need to change that. And that process is just customer service. Calling in, and I have never waited so long. Press this, press that, press that. You are number 737 in queue. And then they play the worst elevator music ever in my earpiece for the next 4.5 hours. It drives me crazy. But I think that ties into what both of you are saying. And, Mark, you touched on that a lot of companies, because of disruption, have tried to throw technology at it. And then, as we're talking about today, is process. And remember, last week we talked a lot about people. People always trumps process. Process always trumps technology. That's a quote I have from a dear friend of mine and CEO of a very successful financial services SaaS company called Actify. And that is that you have to, you're always going to be successful with great people. So let's set that over here. So assume you've got great people. Before you throw technology at anything, you have to define what that process is. And it really comes down to the why, which is really what you're talking about, Mary. Why do we have, let's use the example I brought up. Why do we have a phone tree? Well, we have a phone tree because we have a lot of customers calling us all the time. And our people are working at home right now, and we don't have a system in place where we can answer those phones by live individuals. Okay. Instead of tackling the issue of we can't have people answer the phone from live individuals with a technology problem, let's get back to what you were talking about, Mary. I would say, let's look at our process. Why are we having people calling us in the first place? Is the way if we're doing online ordering right now, is it not simple enough, and are people ordering the wrong thing? Is there something wrong with our product? So really peeling back that onion, and instead of trying to solve an issue with maybe a false process, if you will, or technology, really get back to what's the core of the issue, which I think is really what you're talking about, Mary. As our worlds have been blown up here, let's almost look at our businesses and say, if we were to take everything we've always done, kind of wipe it clean, because that's kind of what we've done. Wipe the whole, how would we rebuild this company today? What would the company look, what would our customer service process look like today? And why do we have customer service issues? Okay, well, let's break down that process. Let's break down. It's almost like taking the wiping it clean, and looking at your business in a whole new way, because we have the opportunity to do that right now.
Yeah, I think that's huge, Sam. A couple of things that, and just listening to all three of you talk that are coming to mind, is that it's definitely people first, then processes and systems. It's interesting to me, in most organizations that I work with, and it's probably the same for you, is either you have no processes and systems at all, or they're so friggin' complicated that nobody implements them.
Right.
And two things have happened to me this week that I know were definitely a symptom of lack of process by somebody. I reached out. I was working on trying to get somebody to do a research project for me. And somebody responded. I answered and said, I'd like to set up an appointment. I couldn't remember who I talked to. They sent me a proposal. They have never followed up with me in 2 weeks. It's a lack of a follow-up system. Now, I've reached out to 2 other companies because I couldn't remember who they were, not because I didn't want to do business with them, but because there was no follow-up process in place for those salespeople. The other is that most clients that I'm working with right now in today's environment are really struggling with an onboarding system, because onboarding people has been one of the things we've really required ourselves to be able to do in person. I mean, that physical, I can bring people in, they can experience the culture. I can tell them, about the company. And a lot of people are fighting redoing the onboarding system. So I'm just curious from a standpoint of, Mark, why don't we kick to you? What are some things that you're seeing that are working with effective onboarding? I had 2 customers today who've never met 3 people on their team. So what are some things that you can do to onboard, to get a process down that's effective?
Yeah, let's talk about that. And before we do that, I want to come back to something that Mary started this whole discussion in terms of rethinking your process. I was talking to a sales leader this morning, and the sales leader was complaining to me vehemently about how the CEO and the ownership of the company that he works for is all caught up in terms of needing processes. And as we were going through the issues, I said, it's not a process issue. It's a people issue. It's people. You don't have the right people in the right seats on the bus. And all the processes in the world don't fix bad people. All it does is really mess things up more. And that comes back to this whole onboarding thing. You have to be willing to say, am I going to make a change from a personnel standpoint? I was speaking to another sales leader today who recently made some wholesale changes in their organization, major changes, and going through that onboarding process right now. And one of the key things that has happened is that, yes, onboarding in a remote environment. Not only are the people remote in one city, but they're in multiple cities. because the company is now geographically diverse. Because that's the other thing from hiring of people. If we're going to stay in a remote work from home environment, you know what? We can hire people anywhere we want in the globe. So how do we onboard? You have to become much more oriented in doing just like this right now, where you're playing a little bit of Hollywood Squares or Brady Bunch, whatever you want to call it, but getting people on. And this is where, from an onboarding standpoint, people have to realize that there's a safe means for them to be able to communicate and share. But what does this mean? It isn't about, oh, well, you can post anything you want on Slack. No, you got to make sure the processes you have in place are easy enough for them to learn on their own at their time. We have to create processes that are flexible. And I'm talking about this from a people standpoint, that are 24/7 at your disposal 24/7. Now, I'm not expecting people to work 24/7, but as I move into more of a geographical dispersed workforce and also need driven, gee, are my kids at home because, school's offline this semester? Do I have parents at home? What are all these issues? People's work days have changed in every single manner. So onboarding has changed dramatically. And you as a leader, you as management have got to be transparent in how you share your feelings, your emotions, because you know what? We're all going through this dance together. Don't sit there and say, oh, I remember COVID in 2005. We never been there before, folks. This is all brand new. Mary, I'm sure you've got some specifics, though, and tying into processes, because, boy, there were a lot of things we wrote in this white paper. So
there are. And you and Meredith and Sam all touched on something that I want to address as well. So first off, in any crisis, we as a leader have to understand our people need more reassurances. I saw this during 9/11, during the first and second Gulf Wars, and we need regular check-ins so that people are getting the best information at the time. That is a process shift. We need more check-ins. People need more of our time as leaders. But we as leaders also have to be operating more efficiently and effectively. And Sam, this goes back to you and the voicemail disasters that we're all familiar with. This week, I made plane reservations for a few people because they called me and said, hey, Mary, we know you're used to traveling all the time. We have to fly. We're on the websites and we can't figure it out. We haven't flown in 5 years. One of us needs a wheelchair. Can you help us out? I said, sure, you bet, no problem. Well, guess what? I was horrified by, sure, I can make the plane reservations, but can you ask for wheelchair assistance online? In this case, you can't. You had to call in. You could not email. You had to call in. Why? Why is that way? I don't understand. Their cost for somebody else picking up the phone and then finally figuring out what I needed and when, once they finally realized it, it was a one-button push solution for them. But it took their time and then it took my time. But worse, how many customers did they perhaps lose who could not figure out their process? And some of my airline execs say, oh gosh, it's really not that hard. I'm like, really? When was the last time you made your own flight reservation? Because it just has not happened. And one of the points we make in this white paper is that good customer service, because I'm looking at it right now, new customer service is that new competitive advantage. And with our review of our processes, and again, being more focused on our end users and buyers, our customers at the very end, instead of being so concerned about our stakeholders and our profit margins, we still have to be mindful of our profit margins, but we have to be very focused on our customers. I wanted to go back to what you said, Meredith, and I wanted to ask the three of you, before 2020, what industries do you think provided great customer service? What industries? Go ahead, just throw it out. Mark, what do you think? What industries?
I would say hospitality, but only in unique locations, unique situations. I wouldn't say the industry as a whole.
Okay, very nice. Meredith, what about you?
I was going to say the same thing in the sense that it's certain parts of it. I mean, we were just talking about the Adventist hospital system. Healthcare certainly isn't known always for its customer service, but when you hit pockets like the Adventist system, it's amazing.
It is amazing. Although I will say, and I've had very great experiences with my local hospital in Castle Rock, Colorado. Big shout out to you folks. But the billing process is not easy. And
Yeah.
people who don't understand billing processes, patients, I think, are oftentimes confused by this. And if you're in the medical world, explaining to patients, by the way, just because you come to a hospital for a surgery does not mean you're only going to get one bill. It's not like ordering dinner at a nice restaurant, you get one bill. No. And what you're very surprised then when you get a bill for your entree, and then a bill for your drinks, and then a bill for your dessert, and a bill for your coffee. That's kind of how a lot of medical systems work, but I do think they're going to have to change. Sam, what about you? Before all this hit, where do you think we had great pockets of amazing customer experience?
Well, I'll give you two that are tied into what you've already said. Number one is, as a Diamond member on Delta, their processes, their customer service is exceptional. I call, somebody picks up the phone within 30 seconds. I can go online. I've got my special areas where I can do certain things. And it always kind of bothered me a little bit. My wife calls me the entitled traveler, which I absolutely am. It's like, why do I get this level of customer service versus the, as she likes to say, the common traveler or the common folk? And it's really not right. Everybody should receive the same Diamond level of service. Now, I know that that's costly, but trust me, I pay a lot of money. Everybody pays a lot of money for their planes. I think they could figure out a way to amp it up a little bit. So when you're a Diamond level customer, the customer service and support is exceptional. And using a healthcare example, I went down to a Mayo Clinic to get some work done. And I remember, let me back up. They've always talked about building a bullet train from the Minneapolis airport down to Rochester, Minnesota, because it's about an hour and a half ride. A lot of people fly to Minneapolis to go to the Mayo Clinic. I came home from the Mayo Clinic. I said to Robin, my wife, I said, they're never building a bullet train. Why? Because if you could get down to the Mayo Clinic that quickly, they would close down every healthcare. Nobody would ever go to a doctor or a hospital in the Twin Cities. Why? Because their process was so amazing. I mean, I went online, filled out everything. It was incredibly easy. I got there. They said my appointment was at 9 o'clock. You know when they called me? 9 o'clock. I walked in. There were specialists for each thing. They said, you need to go down to this lab. How long did I have to wait when I went to the lab? Maybe a minute. I mean, they had everything. So perfect. And I know their processes are so well known. I remember I mentioned it to one of the doctors. They said, yeah, we actually have Fortune 500 companies come and study how we do things. That's exceptional. Now, what's interesting to me is what they're doing exceptional in the sense that any other company couldn't do it? No. Somebody put the time and thought into doing it. And the problem where I see in so many companies as it relates to process is the bigger the company gets, as Mark said, the more complex the process gets. Well, we're going to throw this technology. Well, then we have to have a process for the technology. And then we have to go hire 3 people to manage the process, to manage the technology, and then the thing's out of control. That's why, again, as we started out with this, it's the perfect time to kind of just look at your business and say, what are our goals? What are we trying to achieve? If we could just forget all the legacy process we've ever had, if we were to design something from square one, from the beginning, how would it look today? And I bet if you look at your business, many of the processes you have in place right now would be dramatically different if you actually said, how would we start this if we were creating the company today? How would this look completely different? I would challenge you as leaders to have those discussions.
And in terms of that, that's what I've been working with several of my clients, is in terms of the process that you have in place for everything, whether it's onboarding, whether it's the follow-up that you were talking about as well earlier, Meredith, in terms of not hearing back from people. What can you automate? What can you systematize? What can you implement that takes I remember I have to check in with Meredith about that, or maybe I should send them an email, or maybe I should do that. Take things that are simple to do and automate those things, or give yourself automated reminders so that you're not missing the follow-ups. Automate the things that are easy to automate. One of my people used to do all my bookings for me, and now I have a terrific book system that people just sign in. They book in whenever it's easy for them. They get to decide how long they want. It is seamless, and it takes them right to a landing page that goes directly to my calendar and then sends them a link to jump on a call with me. It's perfect and seamless. Now, We also have to have backups. So when those things don't work, we do have to have people in place. We always have to have some kind of contingency. However, when we're looking at process improvement, a lot of times we do what Mark was talking about and we blow it out of proportion. We make it harder than it has to be. And right now, if we're talking about the customer experience being in the forefront of our business, I think there's some great other opportunities for us to make it simpler for the customer to use, easier for them to use, and in the process, also make it better for our own people as an experience as well. So back to you, Sam, where do you think we can simplify and automate things in our world?
Well, I'll give you one example. I think supply chain. We wrote about this in the paper. Supply chain was so complicated with just-in-time inventory and people relying upon Asia and other places to get their supplies. And what happened when a crisis hit is everything was so complex, or it was so refined. When we look at just-in-time inventory, well, we know exactly how much toilet paper everybody's going to, now it's screwed up. So I think just looking at it, even bigger picture things like that is where can we simplify even complex processes when there's a crisis, or when something, if we get it so, we get our processes so perfect that when a wrench is thrown at it, is it going to ruin the whole thing? Meredith, what do you think about that?
Well, I think you're right on with that. I think for those that are listening to this, if I was going to have one key takeaway, you really need to be asking yourself, one thing that COVID has done is it has made everybody so much more comfortable with online. Mm-hmm. We expect it. And if you are putting any obstacles between you and the customer contacting you or giving you money, they will go another direction. And if I were going to get off this, this live stream and do one thing, I would go back to my team and I would say, where are we creating obstacles for customers to contact us or to do money with us? Mary, kind of the example that you had earlier is like, why do you have to go online? This morning, it was pouring down rain here in Asheville, North Carolina, and of course I had a court time to play tennis at 7:30, and I had to call the club to see if they were going to allow us to go inside. We all have doctor's excuses to go inside. Well, Barbie, the lady who runs the desk, was just screaming. She said, "This phone's been going off the hook." She said, "I can't breathe." I said, "Barbie, the only way we have to contact you is to call. You don't post this online. There's no place we can check the schedules. We have no other options than to make a phone call." So there's two negatives happening there. Number one is you're paying a lot more money to this employee who has done nothing but answer the phone. She's delivered, even though she's lovely, relatively bad customer service because you've had to call 3 and 4 times and we're all kind of mad at her, and then the other is we're frustrated because the place is antiquated because they don't move it online. So I was doing a project with somebody and they gave me an intake form to look at. And I said, I would never fill that out. You're asking me for 12 things. I'm going to give you my name. I might give you my phone number and I want to pay you. If you make it any more complicated than that, it's not happening. So I think that, that's where you really need to start with very, very simple processes and understand that your customer base has changed. They expect to do things online. And if you're not providing that, then you're antiquated. You look like you're out of it. But Mark, what do you think about that?
Well, yeah, and there's two things I want to add here, and I'm going to pick up on what Sam was talking about from a supply chain. Right now, you have to be thinking in everything dual sourcing. We always talk, in fact, Mary, you wrote a book on succession planning, who's next. You think about that. We always have succession planning with people. Well, you need to have a succession planning with your supply chain, with every one of your process. In other words, if this goes down, what do I revert to? Dual sourcing in everything is absolutely critical. And what does this do? It allows you to rethink. And as we've been having this discussion, I went back to when I was 16 years old. Yes, I was 16 years old many years ago. And I was working at McDonald's.
Crisis, right?
What?
That was back in the first COVID crisis.
That was back in the first COVID crisis.
The Spanish flu then, but yeah.
That was back. That was after the Spanish flu, but before. Right. Okay. Anyway, and I was working at McDonald's. And I got promoted as a 16-year-old. I worked there 3 months, so I'm now a manager. And it was very interesting, but you parked in the very back of the back parking lot, and you'd walk through the back door to go to work. And my manager grabbed me and says, "You will never come through the back door again. You will always come through the front door, because that's how our customers come in. You are to come to work by coming through the front door, because that's how you see what customers see. That's what I want as your first observation before you come in and start running the place." That has stuck with me forever. And if you think about it, how many times, and because of my sales background, I'll use CRM. How many times have companies installed a CRM system? Because this is what finance wants. This is what other departments want. Nobody talks to sales. And then they wonder why we go through this whole installation and nobody uses it, because nobody bothered to talk to salespeople, the ones who are actually using it. You see, every process is customer facing. Are you engaging the customer, whoever it is, whether it's internal or external, in the process? This is how you're going to think outside the box. And one final thing, I'm sorry, I'm on a rant here. You know, the railroad got into trouble many, many years ago. Why? Because they thought they were the railroad. What would have happened if they had thought they were in the transportation business? Would they have viewed their self differently? You see, just because you're beholden to this structure, this format that you've been with for years, doesn't necessarily mean that's what you need to be beholden to going forward. Mm-hmm. Think outside the box. Okay, I will shut up on that, and I'm going to turn it back over to Mary. Go ahead.
So I really liked what you said about the contingencies. You know, being military, we plan for failures. You know, we think if there's a single point of failure, it probably will. So you always have to have a backup. And you're right. When Meredith and I came out with our book this year, Who Comes Next? Leadership Succession Planning Made Easy, we had a delay because guess what? They had the paper, they had the printing, but they didn't have the glue to glue everything together. And we were delayed by about 6 weeks. And it's a terrific producer, it's a terrific printer, but it delayed everyone because those supply chains were disrupted. So I do think moving forward, we're going to see more people looking more locally for sourced things. We're going to see simpler processes that deliver a more enhanced customer experience. And I think we're going to see people looking at their business, just like your boss told you to do, Mark, at McDonald's, see it from the customer's perspective. Sam, what do you think?
Well, I agree. And I'm going to stay on that supply chain rant for just a little bit. You know, there's a very large retailer in my city who we love. We love this retailer. I think I direct deposit most of my checks to this particular retailer. Once COVID hit, I go there between my wife and I, my daughter, my son. We go there at least 6 times a week. How long have we been dealing with this COVID issue now? March, April, May, June, 5-6 months already? And they still don't have toilet paper. They still don't have paper towels. They still don't have self soap. They still don't have hand sanitizer. Now, I don't know the inner workings of this company, and I don't know the inner workings of the manufacturer. So I could be completely wrong here. But my hunch is that in the past 6 months, did all these amazing employees they used to have just all of a sudden completely get stupid? I doubt it. So they still probably have really good people. Did collectively probably the billions of dollars they've spent on technology all of a sudden just blow up? I doubt it. I have to believe that something is broken in the process. Now, I don't know where it is, and again, it's probably out of line for me to be complaining because I don't know the inner workings of this organization. But from somebody who's looking outside in, I'm like, how could they not have figured out how to do the process correctly to get the right amount of goods on the store shelves? Now, for people who say to me, well, Sam, the goods aren't being produced. Really? How come when I go to my friendly Costco, I never have a problem picking up any of the items that I just mentioned? So something's working with the process at Costco where it's not working at some of these other retailers, because it's not the people and it's not the technology. It can only be the process. Again, I could be wrong on that, but that's what my gut's telling me. What do you guys think on that?
We'll mail you some toilet paper, okay, Sam?
I'm good. We luckily we subscribe to local magazines and newspapers. It works just fine.
Guys, it is hard to believe, but we are just about to the end of this segment. of the white paper. Luckily for everybody, we are going to be back next week. I love the way that we wrote this and we put it in order. We go from people, process. Next week, we're going to be talking about resources. Yes, that's everything you need, from cash to the things that you need in your supply chain to really make your business run. And we're going to dive into some of those topics. But Mark, Mary, Sam, tell our listeners where they can go to get a copy, their free copy of our white paper.
Sam, jump in, because
Sure.
you know exactly where the website is and how people can get it.
You go to businessleadershiproundtable.com. And when you go there, if you wait just 1 second, a window will pop up. You enter in your email address, and we send the white paper to you. I'm receiving about an email a day or a phone call a day from a CEO who we've sent the white paper to, and they say it's, humbly brilliant, and they are actually using it in their business planning. So I would encourage everybody watching, listening today to go to businessleadershiproundtable.com and get that white paper and study it. Look at the challenges that we point out, the opportunities and the solutions. I know the three of you have also been getting exceptional feedback from some of your clients.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, we'll dive deep in next week on resources. If you'll join us for another session here on LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube Live. And I want to thank my colleagues again, and everybody have a good weekend, and we'll see you next week for more on the state of American business.